morning, everyone. The Department of Finance and Treasury Board faced an unprecedented situation with the introduction of COVID-19 pandemic, which has obviously resulted in unexpected changes to your normal state of operation. Deputy Minister, could you elaborate or tell us how did government adapt during the pandemic?
Sure. So, it's been an interesting time, and it's certainly been an interesting time for the public service. And I've spoken at many places, and I said it's been one of the most challenging of experiences that I've had in my 38 years, and it's also been one of the most rewarding. Immediately, if I go back to when we were notified in 2020 of our first case in the province, we gathered together and we were trying to determine how we were going to navigate a pandemic this COVID situation where we really didn't know a lot at that time, as you can imagine. And we pulled together a typical response, which we have very well developed relative to EMO. And then we quickly realized that wasn't going to work. And we needed to be much more responsive and agile, which I think is probably an oxymoron when most people talk about agility with public service. But that's what we needed to be as the situation was changing rapidly and quickly. So at the time, what we did is we quickly realized that we had to reduce the barriers between the departments. We had to work together as one team. We had to support each other in terms of resources, both financial and human. And we had to have a new way of operating. And you'll see behind me, I have our One Team, One GMB, which really was born from that crisis as a new way of behaving, not just a brand, and supporting each other along the journey of COVID. We seriously needed to flatten the organization. The bureaucracy is called a bureaucracy for a reason. It can be very box and line oriented in terms of where you sit. And we need to empower civil servants to use their decision making, and a lot of times it was their best efforts and thoughts about how we should navigate. So it's been a start of a major shift in terms of the public service and how we deliver for New Brunswickers and support government, and I think one for the better.
Thank you. And I agree. I believe there has been a shift. How will government ensure operational improvements experienced through this pandemic are sustained?
And that's one of the hardest things I would say to do, is to sustain changes for the better, especially in a public service of 50,000. Immediately, early on in the pandemic, we reached out to people that were working during this pandemic and said, how are you doing? What should we keep? What can we do better? Because we needed to learn as we went. And that was really important to us, is to understand how we could improve what we were doing as we were doing it. So we actually brought in people that would observe us and say, you could do better in this area or that area. And we've tried to bake in improvements. What we heard from public servants everywhere is, we don't want to go back to the old way of delivering services. We want to maintain what the improvements that we have seen over COVID. So we've tried to bake those things in. Here we are using technology today, which we had to because of COVID. So we've seen a significant improvement in our ability to quickly adopt technology and use it. That's a good example. Sometimes, we would talk about technology for a year before we embraced it, and then we would take 2 years to do it. And now we can turn around overnight in how we use technology. So it's all about baking in the improvements, trying to make decision-making as close to the ground as possible, listening to the people at the coalface versus dictating from the top and down. So it's all about how we bake those new processes in to to deliver better.
That's good. Well, you brought it up, technology. Internet, near and dear to my heart in rural New Brunswick. What has the government done to ensure internet is accessible in rural New Brunswick?
So, we've heard lots about internet. And this has been really important for us. And certainly from early days, as you can imagine, when we went remote and online with education, it was a concern for us from day one, especially in rural areas. And then we would hear about companies that were dependent on their business for internet as well. Since we have the Office of the Chief Information Officer, this is something that they have been focused on from the very beginning, together with Service New Brunswick. Early someone talked about our economic recovery. Our economic recovery throughout this province, one of the major tools will be our ability to improve our internet throughout this province. So we have an information highway initiative, which will accelerate the deployment of 5G and fiber to the home, to businesses, to schools throughout the province. And I want to say at the very beginning, we reached out to the Department of Education and we said, where are your key areas that we want to make sure that are connected? Because there is a good example of needing to bake in improvements. We needed to bake in improvements for online education. This initiative will accelerate the deployment of the communications infrastructure. We are working with all our telecommunications partners to drive where the improvements need to be made, which are absolutely in the rural areas, to ensure that, as well as to better position the driving technologies that and the automation that businesses need. So this will take time, but you can see all of our telecom providers are very busy doing this. We've also been working with the Government of Canada departments in order to ensure that the areas that we need to be connected are connected. And we are developing a rural broadband and wireless strategy that we plan to deliver to government in March of 2022.